So first up on the news this week, we have a lot of cool stuff on the 411. 411 is going to be where we talk about all cool things that are happening within the news of the week. And this week we have a couple of really cool stories that are going to be dropping and stuff that has been talked about throughout the gaming universe per se, and lots of things that have come up over the past week. So the first thing that we want to dig into this week is a conversation that happened a little bit late in the week. I think it happened around Thursday or so, where Matt Booty from Team Xbox was in a conversation with the dope folks over at let's see, what was that? It was MCV UK, and it was a great article about where he was thinking about the direction of where they want to kind of start off in the next generation with their console and where they kind of want to move in terms of setting up first party titles and talking about where things are going to lean towards everything that's happening in the space, right? So one of the conversations that happened in the previous gen was about, is Xbox going to be able to kind of make sure that they're paying attention to what consumers want in real ways? And are they also going to be able to satisfy consumers with the offerings that they bring to the table right out the gate? One of the things that they felt was a downturn for them last generation, or I guess the end of this generation, was the fact that they didn't really have a lot of big titles in the hopper. They didn't have a lot of games that you would stamp and say, these are our first party titles. These are going to be the ones that you will drive sales, the ones that will make sure you run to the store and go snag stuff. And that is still a little bit of an issue, right? Where it's like, we don't know exactly what is going to be coming down the pipeline besides things like Halo Infinite, Bleeding Edge, which is a game that I think is going to be really cool and maybe possibly a sleeper hit in some ways because it's from Ninja Theory and all those things. But it is one of those things where we still are trying to figure out how we want Xbox to kind of perform in that space. Hellblade 2, Dave from the chat shared that out and agreed. Hellblade 2, which was the game that they showed as the kind of pinnacle initial viewpoint of what games are going to look like on the new Xbox, was something that we saw, and that was really interesting. So Matt Booty goes into the conversation, and the blurb that got the most kind of, I guess traction during that conversation was one where he basically talked about the Xbox not necessarily having first party titles right at launch that are going to be dropping with the console. And everyone lost their minds when that piece came out because everyone freaked out. Everyone talked a whole bunch of stuff and said, yo, there's no exclusives for Xbox coming out for the Xbox Series X. What's going to happen? This console's dead. No one cares about it now because there's no initial first title that's going to be the one that dropped there, which is not true anyway, because they've always talked about the conversation being one in which Halo was probably going to be dropping either at launch or fairly close to launch. So that wasn't a true statement from the internet, as we've always seen. The internet always has their thing. But the direct quote was, as our content comes out over the next year or 2 years, all of our games, sort of like PC, will play up and down that family of devices. Booty explains, we want to make sure that if someone invests in an Xbox between now and Series X, that they feel that they've made a good investment and that we're committed to them with content. So Matt Booty, that's a reasonable statement, right? I feel like if we're talking about where they want to position themselves right now in terms of how they want to look forward, they're already laid a really good foundation for how we all are going to ingest and consume the content that comes out of the Xbox ecosystem. And I say ecosystem specifically because that's what they're doing in terms of laying the foundation for what they are wanting to do going forward. It's not just about Xbox Series X. It's not just about X Cloud. It's not just about Game Pass. It's about all those things in conjunction and how they all want to work together in a real way, so that when you are buying a game, you're looking at that as a purchase into the ecosystem. And that ecosystem purchase gives you more flexibility to kind of move around the space, buy things here and experience them over there, move from one console or one application or one platform to another, and do that work in a way that feels good and feels smart and is interesting. I am on Team Booty with this one. Team Booty makes a lot of sense right now, and I'm hashtagging that right now as Team Booty. You heard it here first on Spawn on Me, that Team Booty is a thing, and I just hashtagged it. I don't care. Get it out of your dirty minds. I don't care, but it's dope. But Team Booty is making a smart decision here. If you look at it in terms of where they have been, where they're trying to go, and then what's supposed to happen with all the games going forward. Some other tidbits that I really liked and appreciated from that article was how Matt Booty was talking about how he wants to spread the love across the studios that Microsoft has acquired. And I felt that that was a really important point. When you go into the conversation about where you want things to land, one of the conversations that you always see when kind of studios kind of either conglomerate, or they have been acquired, or that they've kind of been attached to a larger company. You know, we saw Double Fine get brought into the Xbox fold, or the Microsoft fold, over at E3 last year. And we see, you know, sometimes when that happens, you lose a little bit of yourself in the ethos of your studio, because you have to then kind of maneuver within the Borg, as they say, of the bigger company. You have to kind of adapt to what they want you to do, as opposed to kind of keeping the things that you like, and maintaining that kind of that energy and stuff right there. I always find that really interesting because it happens so often. And it was great to see Matt Booty talk about how he didn't want that to be a part of what they do. I felt like that was really interesting. He says in the article, he says, we have this amazing collection of 15 studio leaders, and if we're always acquiring new things, there will always be somebody who's the new person. You always have the you always have the older studios and the newer studios, and what you don't get in that situation is them treating each other as peers and sharing information or expertise. I like the fact that he talked about that. I feel like that is a thing that people who are paying attention to game development and paying attention to how the soup gets made can appreciate that as an understandable fact, that this is what they're trying to do going forward for not only the studios that were initially brought in, the Ninja Theories and the Obsidians like that, but other studios that they may be looking to bring into the fold later, or in the future, to say, like, here's cool stuff that, you know, you'll be able to, of course, pull on the wealth of knowledge from other folks, from other teams, but also we want to make sure that you are good in the space that you have, and we want to foster that in a real way. So for all the hubbub that came about on the internet over the past couple of days about Xbox has no exclusives, and I'm not going to buy a new Xbox now because of what Matt Booty said, and because of all these things that are in the space, it feels again like the internet doing what the internet does, which is silly and unreasonable. But it also speaks to just how smartly I believe and think that Xbox is kind of maneuvering, with Sony still not really giving us any tidbits on where they want to kind of go yet, in terms of anything besides the logo that got shared out on the PS5. So Team Booty, I rock with you. I think that's dope. I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of what we want to see happen in the initial kind of phase. And I think, again, like the idea of cross-gen being a bad thing, I think Sony's going to do this too. Like, damn sure that The Last of Us 2 is not just going to be a PS5 exclusive. They're going to have a PS4 version that's going to link across to PS5 in some way. They'll have whatever their enhanced version is. And so will Microsoft when it comes to some of the titles that will be on their platform. So the idea that cross gen is a bad thing doesn't make sense, and it also just makes a lot of sense for them from a monetary, from a money standpoint, and from their Game Pass standpoint, to give you all the access for what you could possibly use in a real way. So kudos to them. Kudos to Team Booty. We want to get Matt on the show at some point because I think that this conversation is one that's very interesting and smart. And it's a very big difference between what we've seen in some previous years, the Matric years, when those things came up in terms of conversation. So I'm excited for that, and I'm hoping that that's going to be a thing that we see in a real way, kind of come to fruition in good spaces. Moving on, we have a couple of other stories for the week. One of the things that came up during CES that I thought was particularly interesting was their debut of a concept called the Alienware UFO console. I thought that was something that was pretty interesting in terms of what they want to showcase for the next gen going forward. It is a Switch-like device that runs PC games, which I thought was pretty interesting. The fact that they are kind of moving into the same form factor is even more interesting because PC games, when you think about the power that you need to run those things well and to kind of showcase them in a good way, it is not easy to squunch down, that's not a real word, squunch down all the components and all the pieces to make that piece of kit work well in that small form factor. But the idea that Dell and Alienware are trying to do this is pretty cool in concept. I think the major things that we'll see as being problematic for them are going to be price, for sure. Price, I don't know how you get a kit that quote unquote powerful to be able to run full PC games in a handheld down under $1,500. I don't know how you do that. And if you do make it at that price point, who in the hell is going to buy that thing? I do like the fact that they have kind of copied the form factor of the Switch. I think the Switch has proven to be, depending upon your hand size, I still have issues playing my Switch in a non-docked version because my hands are larger. But the fact that they use that as both a form factor that they thought was smart in both forms, the one that is the dockable form and the one that is kind of all of it in a handheld, is very smart. And I kind of really dig the way that they showcased the kind of controller component to it. It has its own versions of Joy-Cons that you kind of snap off, and a venting backplate that also kind of serves as a stand for it. It's a really interesting idea. I don't know how heavy that thing is going to wind up being. I think it's probably going to be massive in terms of weight. It probably won't be as light as a Switch, and definitely not as light as a Switch Lite. But the other parts of that are caveats that may be problematic are, one, the fact that you probably will only get, and I think they shared this during the CES conversation, around 2 hours of battery life on that thing, which defeats the purpose of carrying around something that big, which has an 8-inch screen on it, to only get 2 hours of life out of it. It's like you're kind of carrying a big netbook. Not a netbook, a big gaming power book that used to only really get you to like 4 hours of gameplay when that was off a AC wire or plugged in, to move from a smaller form factor that you would hope to have more battery life, but then you get half that to be able to play it in such a way. So I'm not excited about that part of it. I think that's kind of a bad maneuver on their part. And it's not going to run more than likely at 60 frames per second, at least this first iteration of which they shared, both in non-docked and docked form. The folks over Engadget ran a really good piece on it early on, right after they showcased it, and they were like, yeah, it's not really running at 60 frames yet. Although many games, even on console, don't run at 60 frames. it is a version of PC gaming that I don't think a lot of people actually want in a real way, which I find also interesting that they kind of bridge the gap in between that space too, and did it in a way that isn't necessarily as good. Um, so it'll be really cool to see what this winds up becoming. I think it's interesting in terms of what we think of when we talk about what handheld gaming can be, especially from a PC perspective. Um, but those same things are always going to be in the space. Price is always going to be a huge factor to that. And then again, what games am I going to be able to play? Like if I can play Red Dead 2 on this thing and play it well, even if it's at 30 and it's stable at 30, that would be worth it to a certain extent. I think that would be worth it. If I can play Overwatch or if I can play Apex Legends from a PC perspective, not a PP perspective, a PC perspective, on a handheld device like this, it might be worth it. But then again, the pricing is going to be key. Anything that is under $1,000, I think is a win. Anything at 1,000 and above, I think automatically just rules it out from being a thing that people would want to purchase in a real way. So we'll see how that works. I give Alienware and Dell kudos for putting this out in the world and making it a thing, because it shouldn't be a thing, but they totally did. And I'm excited to see where they go next with it. It'll be really cool as well. Last piece of news for this week was something I saw over in IGN, which I thought was really interesting. A game that I'm really excited for in 2020 when it comes down the pipe, and is one of my most anticipated games of 2020, is going to be Disintegration, which I think is going to be super dope. I got a chance to play it at E3, I believe, this past year. It was PAX, actually. It was PAX. And it is this really fun hybrid of MOBA style gameplay and a shooter and a tactical game all in one, where you're basically in this hover ship, and you have folks who are your ground troops, and you're ordering them to kind of take positions and finish off fights and attack other units and enemies. So it has this RTS feel, but it also feels like a top-down shooter, but also feels like a MOBA. And IGN, who is doing a month-long look at Disintegration from the folks over at V1 Interactive. If you did not check out our interview with the folks over there from PAX, check out our YouTube channel. It's over there. But I'm really excited for it. They're doing more information, or sharing more information about the game that drops, or that will be dropping at the end of the year, or towards the end of the year, from what I remember. So really excited about what that's going to look like. If you have not checked it out, make sure that you do. And when Disintegration drops and blows up, know that we were the first couple of people who to tell you about it. So we get kudos and props for that stuff early on in the year. So we're going to take a quick break. Make sure you're chilling here in Twitch land. Make sure you're chilling in podcast land. Take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this.